Okay, so are we ready to get started? Pom pom. This is what they do in Zimbabwe, right? TD, pom pom. Okay, so welcome everyone to this session called The Wealth of Soils. Are we okay with the audio there? The subtitle, who has the program in front of them? It's a very lofty subtitle. We spent a long time on that. I think it's the economic incentives for restoring soil carbon and restoring the land and drawing down soil carbon. And it's great to see a great crowd here today. This is obviously a very important topic regarding soil health and agriculture. And there are two sponsoring organizations today. One is called Soil for Climate, which is a group that I started with my colleague Carl. And this is Carl, just came in nick of time. And the other group is called the Soil Carbon Coalition. And Dee Dee Piercehouse is here. Dee Dee, will you stand for a second? And a lot of people around here know Dee Dee. I mean, we're very similar groups, obviously. And the objective of the Soil for Climate group is specifically to get soil in the climate narrative. That is the objective, to get climate scientists and negotiators talking about soil. The Soil Carbon Coalition that Dee Dee is with is more focused on actually working with land managers to actually teach them how to actually measure carbon in their soil. And last July, we also co-hosted an event in Thetford, and our guest speaker was Professor William Mumma from Tufts University, who's a leading climate scientist. And that talk was more sort of science-oriented. This time we wanted to focus more on the economics. So if it's going to happen, land managers have to, it has to be viable for them. So we thought we would focus more on the economics. And so that's what today's program is. And so we have exciting program, obviously, as you know, and we just wanted to do very, very brief, like wicked brief introductions of everyone in the room, like literally just your name and one more phrase about what group you're with, or if the group you're with isn't germane to this, then, just what you're interested in, but like really quick. Like I would say, Seth Itzkan, Soil for Climate, bang. Okay, that's an example, all right? We have some other distinguished guests in the audience we'll get to, but so let's just start here.
Right, Walter Yana, Healthy Soils Australia.
Good, that's a perfect example of what I want. Okay. Yeah, go on.
Jan Lambert from Charlestown, the Valley Green Journal, and I published a book about water and soils.
Tom Nicholas, Healthy Soils Australia.
Precious Fury, Zimbabwe, Holistic Management.
Sally Dodge, Iroquois Valley Farms.
Carl Tiedemann, Soil for Climate.
Dale O'Branson, Iroquois Valley Farms, Food and Farmland Company.
Will Allen, Cedar Circle Farm, Regeneration International.
Hi, Liz Jager, Young Farmer.
Ryan Sanderson, Hartford High School.
Gabrielle Williams, Hartford High School.
Megan Wilson, Hartford High School.
Eric Becker with Swamani, Vermont.
I'm Michael Pack, just interested in the topic.
Paula Berry, Sustainable Woodstock. Rachel Hustle, Noka, Vermont.
Marty High, Enfield Shaker Museum Community Garden.
Colin High, same place. Dennis Kellerman, been involved with various environmental organizations since 1951, so that makes me an ancient member.
Tag along.
Anita Goat, local gardener farmer.
I'm Alex Aronchuk, the student at Dartmouth.
I'm Maya Wilcher, I'm also a student at Dartmouth.
Julie Keene, interested in the Soil Coalition curriculum.
Dee Dee Piercehouse, Soil Carbon Coalition. Barley, Future Harvest, Chesapeake Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture.
Timothy Odell, Carbon Coalition.
Rich Shin, grass farmer.
Chris Ryman, Aetna.
I'm Dave McManus. I have two hats. I'm chair of the Sustainable Hanover Committee, and I'm a co-founder of Full Sun Company. We are processing oil seeds in Vermont and making oil and meal for animals.
Susan Delatra, Randolph, Vermont. Rona Silver, Randolph.
Heather Shan, Weathersfield, Vermont.
Allison Baker, Cedar Circle Farm.
Guy Crosby, Clay Hill Farm.
Oh, Karen Chamberlain, Clean Yield Asset Management.
Okay, great. That was perfect. Let's hear it for everybody. All right, good group. I'm really excited that there are high school and college students here. That's a big win for us. Okay, so let's start with Precious. Nope, sorry, you want to go second? Let's start with Ridge Shin. Ridge Shin is a social and economic entrepreneur. He has been advancing the grass-fed and grass-finished beef industry in New England for years. He is starting a new organization that he's going to tell you about called Grazier LLC, where they want to make, well, he'll explain it to you, but it's very, very exciting. There's obviously a lot of problems with traditional ranching, and he has a solution for that, which will be economically viable for local ranchers and will be healthy for the land and the climate. So please welcome Ridge Shin, and I will get your slide up. This is you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to sit here and advance
I
it,
can do
or,
it,
or do you
yeah.
want to do it? Okay.
Okay, so we already found out that I'm grass-fed beef is my thing. So I'm kind of crazed about grass-fed beef, and you can see my title, Economics Real Wealth. And my proposition is the real wealth comes from the sun through cattle, and this how they all work together in grass and soil. So I'm going to try and change some paradigms, shake up some paradigms, and give you some things to think about. One of the things, I talked with a group from MIT the other day, and a group of students from, and their study was sustainable protein. When they came out, I said, the only sustainable protein is grass-fed beef. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, because when you have pastured pork and pastured poultry, guess what? They only have one stomach, not four stomachs. They have to eat grain. Where does the grain come from? So when I look at pastured poultry, that's great. That's better than confinement poultry or confinement hogs. They still have to be fed grain. So I see an acre or two of grass that's been destroyed by glyphosate, GMOs, to provide that grain for those cattle or for those pigs and chickens, unless it's organic. Anyway, I don't want to go off on that track too much, but let's start here. So I learned, you've been in there a long time, I learned to farm in the 1800s. So that's a picture of me up there. So a number of years ago, I worked at Old Sturbridge Village. And we did it like this. With the oxen, we mowed the hay with the scythe, we made haystacks. Why it's interesting is because of the economics, and this whole talk is about the economics. And one of the things today that we find that there's a lot of focus on having the farmer hand a piece of meat directly to the consumer. My feeling is that's a romantic notion that is very hard to make work economically, and never was the model in America. So in the 1790s, the 1800s, when we worked at Old Sturbridge Village, we were the beginning of what was called living history. So we went and studied the tax records and looked at the artifacts and tried to replicate the processes that the farmer was doing at the time. What we found, the tax records of 1790, is there was almost everybody had a 100-acre farm, 4 or 5 cows. When the sun shone and the snow went away and the grass grew, everybody milked those cows, and everybody made cheese and made butter, Now, there wasn't any market to go sell it to the customer directly because everybody else was making cheese and butter. So you took your cheese and butter to the local general store and traded it for fabric or needles or knives or whatever you couldn't make. The store owner was the aggregator at the time. He took all the cheese and butter and put it in a barrel, put the barrel on a ox cart, and it went to Boston. So from day one, we had what I call an aggregation model. And a lot of people, when you start talking about aggregation or big, they say bad. You know, big is bad. My feeling is working together and aggregation is the only way. And if you look at history, after that early aggregation, then you had the milk train to Boston. All the farmers would bring their milk can down, put it on the truck. Then you had the co-ops, the Cabot Co-op, for instance, more recently, where farmers aggregated their product in order to go into market. So, as I said, I think it's kind of a romantic notion that the farmer hands a piece of meat to the customer, and it's very hard to do that economically in terms of making a living. It's nice, it's a great relationship, it's perfect for local, get to know your farmer, but in terms of the farmer making a living, it's a hard road to hoe, in my opinion. So, just to look at this a little bit, the other thing I like to do is just think about landscape in bigger terms. So this is a picture from a diorama that's at Harvard Forest in Petersham, Mass, where they did a diorama over time of before European colonization, clearing the land. This is by the 1830s when it's about 80% open, 20% wooded, to today where it's 20% open, 80% wooded. So there's just been this whole cycle over a long period of time of land. And right now, land is very closed in terms of trees. But at one time, it was all cleared. And it wasn't cleared by D8s and bulldozers and things like that. It was cleared by cattle. And then, interestingly, the trees began to grow in because of what I call externalities. It was much easier to go west and plow those deep soils, plow the prairie. And then the trains were built to bring the product back to the market. Today, we all realize that's not a possibility for the longevity to go and farm, take the water from Colorado, grow our lettuce in California, and bring it back to Massachusetts. That model is broken. So we kind of have to go back to my feeling, something that's in New England. So let's move along. We formed the Grazer LLC just recently because we got one vendor that wants us to produce 5,000 head a year in New England. We have 600 mom and pop health food stores that want grass-fed beef, the real thing, not sort of, kind of, almost grass-fed beef. Most of the beef that's produced, and people say grass-fed, you really have to check and say, is it 100% grass-fed? Because all beef is grass-fed. Most all of it's finished on grain. And I feel that changes the fats in the meat, it changes the soil, changes the carbon, changes all kinds of things. So my feeling about grass-fed beef, it's kind of like pregnancy. You know, you can't be sort of, kind of, almost pregnant. You either are pregnant or you're not pregnant. And that's how I feel about grass-fed beef. But anyway, this tremendous market. You know, somebody comes in and starts talking about marketing, I say, wait a second. It's in every single store. It's in Kroger's, it's in Costco, it's in Target, it's in Walmart. And what's interesting, it's the highest priced product in that meat case. Burger going for $6.99. So the market is established, but where's the meat coming from? Australia, Uruguay. Not to badmouth these guys from Australia, but that's where it's coming from. Australia, Uruguay. Ireland just kicked in the door to bring in grass-fed beef to the Boston market. So we have this product coming from all over the world. Chipotle says, grass-fed beef, we're going to do 100% grass-fed beef. Chipotle uses 250,000 carcasses a year. They're going to Australia because the product isn't here. Why isn't the product here? Because we have all these individual farms that can't get together, in my opinion. But one of the things people say, after you explain the whole story about how it's healthy, it's better for the soil, sequester carbon, on and on, people say, but it's so expensive. So I show them this slide. So if you take a Snicker bar, it costs you $1.20. If you divide it out, it's 92 cents an ounce. My grass-fed beef is 44 cents an ounce. So I'll leave you to decide whether that's expensive or not. But the industry, the cereal, the candy bars, everything is, you know, they're put in small amounts, and if you start to figure out the price per pound, compare it to the meat, it's a no-brainer. This meat's going to make you healthy. That's probably not. So anyway, going on, what people are really looking for is fat and flavor, high-quality processing. Traceability is huge. So here's our proposition. We looked at the number of beef cattle in New York and New England. There's 127,000 beef cattle grown in New York and New England, not dairy cattle, just beef, every year. So we got 127,000 beef cattle. The national average herd size is 40 head. 20, 30, 40 head. That's the average. So where do these calves go now? The cattle buyers buy them, put them on trucks, and they eventually end up out here on the feedlot. They go from New England to the feedlot. So the cattle are already here in New England. So why can't we get them to market? We have huge, unique advantages in the Northeast. We have water. Talk to somebody in California about that issue. When we have a droughty year, we only have 35 inches. What's interesting is most of New England was dairy, has been dairy until quite recently. I get myself in trouble when I say dairy is dead because there's probably some dairy farmers in the room. But dairy has declined in the Northeast dramatically. Dairy has moved west to the mega dairies, and that land that was dairy has gone into making hay for the most part. The big industry in New England now is making hay, which I feel is really a shame because it's a mining operation. You make hay, you sell it to somebody who puts it through a horse, the manure goes in a dumpster, never comes back to the land. And that's kind of where we're at now. But the soils we started out with are dairy quality soils. And obviously we get the proximity to the markets of the world. Everybody in the world's trying to fly their product into our market. New Zealand flies lamb into New York City. Uruguay brings it by containers to the port of Philadelphia. Everybody's trying to come into this market. And here we are sitting in the market. Plus, we have plenty of cattle. So there's a whole lot to doing it, and we don't have time to talk about that. Seth said I couldn't talk for 2 hours. He said 15 minutes max. But what we've discovered over the last 15 years is that there are certain genetics, certain cattle breeds that work best on grass. This is a breed called the Devon. I actually imported this herd from New Zealand about 2008. But they're the kind of cattle that were around in the U.S. in the 1960s. And the cattle have been selected for the feedlot, but we have to go back about 40, 50, 60 years to get the kind of cattle that really thrive on grass. And then the big challenge is to know how to make the cattle fat on grass. So there's many, many people that are doing grass-fed beef. Simply take away the grain, and you got grass-fed beef. But you don't have very good grass-fed beef. You have grass-fed beef that's tough, that's not fat, it's not palatable. It's like the early days of organic. When you bit an organic apple, you expected to find a worm in there because people didn't know how to do it. That's where we are with grass-fed today. But we do know how to do it. So, you know, I took some steaks, and a friend, Dan Barber, he's a pretty famous chef down in New York. He's got Blue Hill in Manhattan and Blue Hill at Sohn Barn. And he has embraced this whole farm-to-table movement for years. He's been one of the ones that's been buying grass-fed beef, trying to make this thing go. And I said, well, Dan, try a couple of our steaks, would you? And he said, Rich, I can't really. I don't really want to buy them. I've already got my people I'm buying from. I said, just taste them. So he tasted them, and we blew him out of the water. He was like, this beef was unbelievable. This was his quote that he sent me an email. That he said, we just have to figure out how to do this. So he made me come down and talk to his whole staff at the restaurant. He made me go to his farm in Great Barrington, talk to his farmers. But this is the possibility. Tremendous, great taste and tenderness on grass. But it's not a no-brainer. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of skill. This is kind of a corollary. This is what happens when we do it right. We put this forest to work, the root systems of the plants, this whole soil food web below the soil, goes to work when we do it right. Like I said, I don't have time to tell you all about that. But I'll just show you a couple of these pictures because this is, you'll see a lot in these other talks. You know, this is Ian Mitchell Innes's farm in South Africa. He does intensive grazing. This one person doesn't. This is my farm in Massachusetts. Interestingly, this was the land trust land that I leased. This was in corn for 25 years, sprayed with all the worst possible poisons. We took it over, we planted some grass, started grazing, and you can't see very well in this picture, but the grass in this field, this is my field, that field belongs to another farmer. So in this field, the grass is 4 feet tall. In that field, it's 2 feet tall. The only difference, same sun, same water, same everything, different management. And what's interesting, this grass is 4 feet tall, but it's also dense. You know, this is a stick that I have that the NRCS makes. And what you're supposed to do is, see, there's a little grid here, and you slide this into the grass, and you look down and you count the dots, and that tells you how dense your grass is, how many acre inches of biomass that you actually have. So when I slide this stick into my grass, I can't see the stick. And it's 4 feet tall. So how much biomass do I have on that acre compared to that acre? It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning, and done in a few years, a few short years of the correct management. And what's happened is our roots have gone down and the grass is up here. So one of the challenges, people see that tall grass and they say, you know, you're wasting it, make it into hay, cut it, do something with it. And I say, no, 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 that's exactly what I want. And what I want to do is graze part of the grass and trample the rest. And it's very, very hard for farmers to see anything left in the field. We want to cut it and put it in the barn. But the reality is, if we can manage the cattle so we graze the top of the grass and trample the rest, that's what's perfect. So these are the benefits. Grassland restoration, carbon sequestration, nutrient-dense food, humane animal treatment, energy and water savings, and the most important one to me is local economic development. So if all the little farms, you know, our model is we take the cow-calf operators that exist already, 20, 30, 40 head. What we want to do is we'd love to influence the genetics in their herd. We'd love to take one of our great grass bulls, whether he's a Devon or an Angus or whatever he is, and breed those cows. Then, instead of those people either trying to finish those cows or selling them to the cattle dealer, we want to go pick them up when they're a year old. So now we would have 500 to 1,000 head of cattle in New England on one property. And we would finish them. Now, finishing in my case doesn't mean feeding them grain. It means making sure they have energy all day long. So moving them 6 times a day. So if you have 20, 30, 40 head of cattle, you can't possibly finish because you have another job. You can't be out there moving them 6 times a day. But our proposition is we have some full-time employees moving the cattle 6 times a day. So this is our game. Find these big finishing farms. We found a couple. We're actively looking for probably 5 of these finishing farms. We want 1,000 acres. Doesn't have to be one big rectangle. Could be 200 acres, 300 acres, 400 acres. We need to walk from one to the next to the next. We prefer to walk the cattle rather than truck them. Walk them up a power line, down a snowmobile trail. Cattle would prefer to walk than get in a truck. And the economics and health of the cattle and everything. So this is our proposition. We come get these calves from all over, take them to the finishing farm, finish them, and then harvest them in New England. This model is not something I dreamed up. I went to France years ago with a bunch of ag professionals, and we studied a group called the Alliance Pastorale. And what they have is a group of 22,000 farmers that feed 500,000 lambs into one slaughterhouse. All of those 500,000 sheep are the progeny of 200 rams. So they have 200 rams in the insemination center. Technicians go every day and get the semen from those 200 rams, go out and breed 500 to 1,000 ewes every day. So when you get to the slaughterhouse, you get this different looking animals, but genetically very similar, consistent quality. You have 500,000 lambs that are marketed under the brand La Belle Rouge, which is the top brand in France. So this is the concept, to take all these little disparate farms, unify them a little bit with the genetics, but then finish the cattle under the eyes of a very skilled grazer. And this is the slaughterhouse. A lot of people say, well, slaughterhouse is a bottleneck, but Vermont Packing House is just built. You can see it's a beautiful intakes, Temple Grandin design, and they're ready to work at some significant capacity. So here's the story, conventional versus grass-fed. Fossil fuel oxidizes carbon whenever we plow, erodes the soil, flooding and drought, nutritionally deficient. And here we have animal and solar power, sequester carbon, build soil rapidly, store water deep in the soil, we make nutrient-dense food. There's so many questions we don't have time to talk about because I'm running over my time, I think. But one big question is, well, it snows in New England. I have the answer to that. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. But the
What's the answer to that?
the answer to that is you stop grazing in July. And there's a SARE grant that I did. It's on the internet, public domain. We stopped grazing in July on 20 acres. We started grazing in December, January, and February in Massachusetts. We moved them with a wire. We did forage analysis in July, December, January, and February. Sent it to Cornell. My advisor at UMass did a chart, a bar graph, not a bar graph, but a chart showing the decline in relative feed value and total digestible nutrients over the winter. Then we plotted a bale of baleage and a bale of hay on the same chart. They were less than my grass in the field. So now you look at the cost parameters, and that's in the study too. So you can either go on my website or you can go to the SARE website and find that study. And people can say what they want, replicate it, show me I'm wrong. But not for finishing cattle now, but for cows and calves who have much lower nutritional needs than the finishing cattle. So you say, well, we got the snow this last winter. We couldn't do it for a month, but everybody feeds hay for 180 days. And they spend all summer making hay. So it's a balance of storing the grass alive and then coming back and grazing it. And we're going to waste some, but that's perfect because then we feed the soil. Anyway, this is, I generally ask, the first question is how many people in the room are farmers or involved in farming? And not enough hands are up. They all got to be up because this is it. Eating is an agricultural act. So every dollar you spend influences whether they go to grass or whether we go to feedlots. And I think that the customer really is, again, I could spend an hour talking about how powerful the customer is in this equation. Much more powerful than the USDA or policy or anything else. So I'll leave it at that and take questions later.
Thank you, Rich. Now, obviously, all these speakers, could easily do the whole program. But we just kind of want to just give you like these, it's called the fire hose approach, just fast. But we want to leave time, we want to leave ample time afterwards for discussion. Our next speaker is Precious Puri from Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe. I must say Precious is a dear friend of mine. I've spent a lot of quality time with her in Africa, and at the time I was visiting the Africa Center for Holistic Management, and she was one of the village facilitators, so she would go into the villages and would teach them in the methods, and she also grew up in a village that practices some of these methods. So she has seen firsthand how proper grazing and agriculture can restore soil, which has economic benefits, obviously, for the people in the community. So please welcome our special guest from Zimbabwe.
Oh, thank you, Seth. Good evening, everyone. Hi. You're scaring me. Yeah, so good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm just going to share really our story from Zimbabwe, mainly focusing on that yellow block there, which is the Wange communal lands. But the story begins from the green dot or the green round, which is the Dimbangombe Ranch, which means the word Dimbangombe itself means tall grass for cattle. Yes. So that is a learning site or a savory hub in Zimbabwe, which helps reach out to rural communities. So I grew up in one of the rural communities. We work in 16 there in Zimbabwe. I'm a community facilitator, an educator in holistic management, but tonight is about sharing how holistic management or rangelands healing has helped bring out economic benefits to communities. So these may not be thousands or big monies, but you will know that when people work together, you obviously get benefits. So this is what we do in holistic management. Rich did a great job in showing you that he grazes all year round using grass. That's what we do as well at the center and in the communities. But we do that mostly because we mimic the zebras, the buffaloes, the wildebeest, and we call it bison here, which co-evolved with the grasslands in the olden days. And so we use the tool of livestock, which is the trampling, dunging, and urination to revive our grasslands. And so these are multi-species herds that we run in Zimbabwe. Cattle, sheep, goats, all together, all year round, crawled out in the bush, the slide underneath there. So you can use a highly intensive impact or just moving and grazing. So let's go quickly to the benefits. The first benefit that we have, the land at the center that is being managed by holistic management had been bare for over 30 years, and it's the same story even in rural communities. But what we note, this is called animal days per hectare, as in how much hectares does one animal need per day to feed. But you will notice that we make three to four times more forage, 3 to 4 times more grass in areas where we've used holistic plant grazing than in areas that we don't. So blue and red being areas where we use holistic plant grazing. So the benefit of this is that rural people don't have to buy grain for cattle, but let's say they had to. They don't have money and they don't have to. It's healthier and it saves money. We have varieties of wildlife now coming back because of our management tool, which is holistic plant grazing. That is sable, my favorite, antelope, and most people's favorite. So we have sable, buffalo, zebras coming back, and so we get to get people like you guys coming to see, taking photos, and paying money. And we get to have our livelihoods because this is where we live from. We depend on our land, and that is an inheritance, and we definitely should take care of it. Let's come to water. When you cover the land and have organic matter or litter cover on your land, you harvest a lot of water when it rains. We usually receive anything between 15 to 25 inches of rain in our communities or in Zimbabwe, where I come from. But what happens to the 15 to 25 inches depends on what you've done on the land. And so when you harvest a lot of rainfall, you regenerate or you rehydrate your underground water system, and you have clean river streams flowing. That woman there is taking drinking water from the river. More than that, you do not waste a lot of money buying pumps to drill water from the boreholes. You can water your livestock for free. All these are savings. All this is money. But usually we want to see money in terms of green. We also use your US dollar, by the way. So, but that is lots of money saved, because now this woman doesn't have to walk miles and miles. Even if you were to drill a borehole, there is enough water right around the year to supply for families. This is a river at the center, at the Africa Center for Holistic Management. We used to drill lots of boreholes to water wildlife and livestock. But now we do not need. We have many water sources like this one, ponds right around the year. This river now, after 15 years of management, flows right around the year, regardless of the amount of rain that we receive. And you can check on the riparian vegetation and the grasses and the steady river banks. I'm doing good on time, actually. my work is to train local communities, rural communities. And we all know knowledge is power. And I think if you can empower a community member to totally be in charge of their land, they are more powerful than any other person. So the trend in most communities in Zimbabwe that suffer from hunger, poverty, or are affected by droughts is to depend on food aid, which is like food aid from USAID, European Commission, all sorts of NGOs coming to bring grain, barley, oil. But we are farmers. We can farm our own grain in ways that are right to us, and we eat the maize meal, we call it sadza, and we are healthy, and we do not get the impact of diseases that come with industrially grown foods. And so we share a lot of knowledge, lots of training that goes into this and facilitation, but the facilitation is such that people can then even train other communities, and that is wealth, if you can educate someone else or your peer. So that guy there, if you visit Zimbabwe, you'll meet him. So let's look at these cattle. These are community cattle. They are crawled up in the mountains or in the valleys or around homes, depending on what their plans state for that time. And with livestock management that we've done with communities, we've put in a lot of structures, which we call treatment calendars or livestock calendars. And this is to just improve animal production. And so in the years in general, people have at least 40 to 41% livestock production per their herd. But you'll find that this community in particular, I picked them out because their number was also thrilling to us, the trainers. They improved their productivity by 71%. From just by being close to their livestock every time, noting every sick one, just that care. And we use what we call less stress animal handling. Ridge might be a pro in that, but in our normal day-to-day living, when boys are moving with cattle, they hit them with stones, making lots of noise. And so we train them on how to calmly handle livestock such that as they feed, they are not stressed and they don't lose condition. And the pregnant ones actually get to the time where they calve. Communities work together in this program, that is. Otherwise, in general, each man is by himself. But if you can share herding loads, if you can share cropping loads, and then labor demands go down, and people can take care of other businesses. They can take care of their kids, help them to do schoolwork, they can take care of their homes, decorating homes. Women love decorating their homes. But then if you have a whole lot of workloads, even your lifespan diminishes. And so you have healthy communities that are united, young men that can feed their families from using the same method of animal impact to regenerate crop fields. So you will find that there are lots of women in this program and lots of youth. That young boy there is 25 years old, but he's a chairperson of a whole group that is doing holistic management. And we have lots of women leaders who are chairpersons. I'll show you one of the ladies. So let's take a look at the crop field story. I mentioned it in brief. Like I said before, people work together. You can see them. That is an enclosure material that we use to crawl our animals. This would be a crop field where it will be crawled overnight for 7 days in each patch, where you use whatever number of livestock you have, so that you gain a lot from the urine and the dung of the livestock, as well as the hooves. So you can see the difference. That maize crop was planted same day, same time, same rainfall, but the difference is the animal manure that has been put, and you do not need synthetic fertilizers when you do that. One, we cannot afford them. Two, if the government gives them, they are late or they never come. Three, would rather have it the way that we've always had it, that is using our livestock. So I've heard a word here that's called Three Sisters. Is that right?
Right.
It's new to me, but that is one of the three sisters. So for us, the cover crop, or what we call smother crop, would be pumpkin or squash. Yes, pumpkin, squash, peas, groundnuts, everything that will fix the soil but also retain moisture. As you know, we have at least 15 inches of rain on a good year, or on the best year, 23 inches. But in between the rains, there are long dry spells. So we want to do the best to preserve the moisture. And communities do this. And usually they get 2 to 3 times more rain, more food. So this is a story from this past rainfall season. That is about 15 inches of rain, if not 13. So communities or members of the community that did animal impact, they harvested this maize here, the big one. And others they got legal, and they just have 2 months of food. Others have 5 months worth of food. We had a terrible rain season, but others still got more. That means you do not have to buy for a long time. And as community members, you can work around. I grew up doing that, where I can work for my neighbor and they give me a bucket of maize and we get food. So there can be food trade within the community when others get a bumper harvest and others do not. And so the center, and I am also now an entrepreneur who is willing to train communities to do entrepreneurial skills, mostly for holistic management communities. So we are now getting into chickens. These chickens are going to support, just like the cropping activities are supporting communities, just like if we get and harvest enough animals, we support ourselves with finances. So our chickens, they feed just on the grounds, wherever we are. And you know, we grow our own maize, our own grain. And this is just targeted because our communities are situated nicely to the Victoria Falls area, which is a touristic area, and they'll be growing. Most chickens are confined, just like we have confined cattle in most places. But now we are getting into pastured poultry and eggs. That is their accommodation. So this is on trial for now. It hasn't really gone out to the communities. But this is a new angle, so that we keep supporting herders, which are the most important people. We keep supporting women, who are the drivers and movers of the program. And we keep supporting men who desire to see their livestock getting more and more healthy. So this will help into medication and water funds to just keep the programs running in the communities. So that is our story, and this is a new development. Thank you. I did good, like 12 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Precious.
Okay.
Our next speaker will be Sally Dodge from Iroquois Valley Farms. They are a farm and food company making impact investments in local and organic agriculture. And Sally has been very influential in helping small farmers in New England through CSAs and other programs. Please welcome Sally.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let me just get your slide up here.
Where are you located?
The company itself, Iroquois Valley Farms, is located in the Chicago area of Illinois, but my husband Dale Gilbranson and I are the Northeast representatives of the company. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about it. So I want to thank Seth and the Soil for Climate. You've been a big influence on my life in the last 9 months, or maybe a little longer, but I think this is an important symposium, and it's really great for everybody to start to understand how important good soil is to the health of our planet. So I'm looking around the audience, and you're quite a diverse group, so I guess there's no way to kind of pinpoint what I'm saying, except that I'm going to talk about money and investment on this economic symposium about soils. As we know, agriculture It has been, used to be the main business of America. It's still a very, very big business. But now agriculture has become, in general, not completely, I'm so happy to hear Ridge talk and Precious talk about international farming, but in this country, it's a closed loop. It's the farmers in general, especially in the Midwest where Iroquois Valley Farms started, grow corn and soybeans, total monoculture, lots and lots of chemicals, lots and lots of equipment, very few people farming that land, big corporations, and then much of that feed goes to CAFOs, which are confined animal feed operations, and those are feedlots or big, huge chicken operations or huge pig farms. And generally, the real farmer who raises the pig or raises the cattle, they get a very, very small percentage of the money. It's almost like, slave labor practically. And farming for those people is not very economic. It's great for Monsanto, it's great for Syngenta and the great big feed companies and seed companies, but not great for real farmers. Let's see. What do I push, Seth?
Oh, sorry, just the right arrow key, Carl. Can you help me out?
Yeah, exactly. What you do it? Oops, it's not doing it. How about down? Nope.
Go on there.
Oh, that
Okay.
one right there. There we go.
So, I woke up on the 1st of January, 2015, and said to myself, what am I going to do this year for my grandchildren? 2015 is the United Nations designated year of the soils. Well, I can support soil, so that's what I am doing for my grandchildren. The pictures here are Dale's and four of our 5 grandchildren, and then up on the left-hand side, those are my sheep partners, Jesse and Callie McDougall and their little boy Angus. And Jesse and I have a flock of sheep together, and we are raising them by holistic herd management principles, which means that we move them every day. And they're amazingly, wonderfully healthy. Dale and I were just out on the West Coast last week, and we were flying home, and with my interest in soil lately, I was just very interested to see how much bare soil there is as we flew across America. I mean, we had really good weather for flying, and I'd say it was 50% bare most of the way across. And the harvest is done in a lot of places, and the land has been plowed up. I know. What I forgot to say on the last one about is generally my relationship with the Soil Age group is that I had read Judy Schwartz's book Cows That Save the Planet about a year ago, and it was a wonderful book. I used to be a cattle farmer myself, and but I never managed them by holistic management. And then Judy suggested that I go on the Soil Age email list, and I just started learning a lot about soil from all the folks who were posting amazing videos, amazing reports, and it's just a great way to learn, and the Soil for Climate group is the same. And then on that video, on that internet site, I saw Bill Muma's presentation last year, at a video of it at the Biodiversity for Climate Change symposium last year. And he was so clear and so hopeful about what we can do for climate change by preserving our soils. And it was the first time I'd heard anything that really made sense. And what he said was, if we could really buckle down and take care of our soils, we could actually sequester enough carbon that we could turn climate change around in 10 to 20 years. Well, I think we all need to do that. So, at that time, I was already working for Iroquois Valley Farms with Dale. We had gotten involved with them because my family owns a farm in Pownell, Vermont, which is right on the border with Massachusetts, and I manage that farm. It's all organic. I have 3 different farm tenants, and I was trying to write a long-term lease. And somehow, by some crazy serendipity at a New York benefit, I ran into somebody who said, "Oh, well, if you want to know about leases, get in touch with Iroquois Valley Farms." So, Iroquois Valley Farms, I don't want to get a little bit too much here, but, okay. Iroquois Valley Farms is an impact farmland investment company. And we buy land for farmers. We always start with the farmer first, and then we bring the capital in, buy the land, and lease it to the farmer, and the farm must be organic. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, though. Let me just look at my notes. So in working with them and looking at getting more farmers on the land in the Northeast, it's been just amazing, because the impacts of supporting organic farmers are tremendous. And not only do they begin with soil and soil carbon sequestration, but they also, once you support the soil, you support healthy food. Once you have healthy food, you have healthy people. Healthy people means less cost of health care. It supports communities. It makes for children that are better able to absorb the education they're getting. It contributes to food security because it's much more regional, and then national security in the long run as well. We build topsoil, sequester carbon, as Precious and Ridge talked about. The water quality improves. We're much less prone to drought. All the different things, habitat, biodiversity, and removes toxins from the environment, which is one of our hugest problems and why we have such a sick population, in my opinion. On top of that, Iroquois Valley Farms is a company which does generate a market return for the investor. And the investors are slow money, impact investors. They want to see their money go to doing something that's good, doing something that's right. We call ourselves a food and farmland company, and I really love that way of looking at it. Even though we're an investment company, we really do support food and farmland. We start, as I said, with the farmer first. The farmer comes to us and says, okay, well, I would really like to add this piece of land to my existing farm or get started on a new farm. And then they find the land and come to us and say, is that going to work? We work with the farmer to build out a business plan that everybody's happy with. We make sure that the farm's not going to be too expensive for the farmer, that everybody can agree on the deal. And then once everybody's happy, we will buy the farmland, lease it back to the farmer, and sell it after 7 years. The farmer may buy the land, or he or she can keep on farming without having to own the land indefinitely. And if they want to buy after 10 years, we're flexible on that. But we require that the farmer operate organically. And it needs to be certified organic, because if we're spread all over right now the Midwest and the Northeast, we need to have somebody who's guaranteeing that farm is being properly managed. It is managed by the farmer. Other than the organic stipulation, we don't say what they have to grow. We don't say how they have to grow it, other than it's got to be sustainable. And it's their own operation. We are a great vehicle for farm succession planning. So if grandmother and grandfather want to retire and need the value of their farm to retire on, it works that Iroquois Valley Farms could buy that farm, particularly because we know that if the next generation have been farming with the grandparents or the parents, that they're going to be, experienced farmers anyway. So it works out great. We buy the farm, parents or grandparents can retire, and then that younger person can work to buy that farm back over a period of time. It's a socially responsible investment on the investment end. We are a certified BCorp. I don't know if anybody here knows what that is, but it's a kind of a hybrid between a for-profit and a non-profit organization, and the B Lab, which is here in Vermont, which certifies you. They require that the work you are doing has social and environmental and financial benefits to society. So I call the socially responsible triple bottom line PPP, people or social, planet, environmental, and profit, financial. Where I have it in my talk, but basically, in order to do the kind of soil sequestration and sustainable farming that we need to save the planet, we need lots and lots of money to buy farms. We need lots and lots of farmers. So we need to be able, as a society, to support these farmers on the land. For instance, if Rich, for his beef operation, is looking for 1,000 acres, or did you say 5,000 acres? Well, somehow we've got to be able to get it for him. So I can see the synergies here. We've also been working with land trusts, and the reason we were out in California was just at the Land Trust Alliance rally, because land trusts are really in a great position to partner with us, with farmers, with our investors, and make a community that supports the land, and in doing that, we're going to support the soils. These are some of our farmers. Almost all of our farmers are millennials. Some are experienced older farmers. These guys are all experienced, but these guys here are in Indiana, and they are raising mostly row crops. So corn, soybeans, beans, hay. They have to do a lot more diversification than a normal Indiana farmer would do, but there's such a big market for dairy grains that's a really good market for them. These guys are also in Indiana. They do more vegetables, pumpkins, various kinds of vegetables. I think they also do some corn. These are dairy farmers in New York State. We help them we bought for them a second farm so that they could expand their herd, and also they wanted to get off of a main road where their house was. They now have 2 other little babies, and they were able to really move to a much better farm, but they still keep the home farm and just have more animals. And so they're a regular organic dairy. These guys are organic dairy farmers in West Virginia. We really like working in Appalachia. These guys had other jobs and then just decided to get off the farm, off of the rat race and get onto a dairy farm that we started. And this is our first farmer from 2007, Harold Wilkins, and he's got a bowl of beans because he's also a row crop farmer, but he's raising a lot of beans, and he's selling organic, everybody's organic, selling them to Chipotle restaurants, organic beans. So we're different because we really look at our land as a long-term farmer-oriented investment. Most farmers who rent land are always in jeopardy of losing it somebody may want to sell their land to somebody else, or they just pull it out from under them. And if you're an organic farmer, you've spent a lot of time and effort building your soils and making your, you need to look over the long term. So we say our favorite holding period is forever. We were started by our founders who are in that picture, who, one is a doctor. He was very interested in having healthy food and having that impact. And Dave on the left was a banker, but both of them had grown up on farms in Illinois in the early days. But they're really visionary, and it's a pleasure working with people who have such a long-term vision and can apply that to the health of our farms and farmers. So we say over that period of time, we help the farmer through transition. So if the farm is a conventional farm, when we buy it, we sort of work with the farmer to make sure that as they go through that transition period, which is a little bit more expensive, and they can't get the organic price for their crops, we help them through that period. And then sometimes it'll take as long as 10 years before the soil is really pumping out what an organic farmer would hope for, but so that they can really look to the long term to build their business. I'll go quickly through this. You have two ways to invest. One is through equity, and the other is through notes that we sell. So that the equity investment, the investor has to wait for 7 years before they can redeem their equity in the company. So it's a real slow money investment, patient capital we call it. With debt, you can buy essentially bonds from us and get a yearly return on those bonds. Commitment to the farmer. A farmer, as I said in the example of the farmer who wants to retire, we can extend that period so that they can go into multi-generations rather than have to sell at the end of, when they're ready to retire. We'll hold on to that land or sell it to indefinitely or sell it to the farmer, but we make a commitment to that farmer as long as they keep to the lease. In Wall Street, you can't count on any real commitment. There are quite a few land investment companies out there, but most of them don't, not any of them that I know of, have as long a term commitment as we have. Quickly go through this. We know that the organic market is paying off right now. There are more and more people interested in organics, more and more people interested in local foods. And I will say the local foods market has really made a difference in the public. So the public is now taking an interest in where their food comes from and how it's grown. And I think that this movement of soil and climate change is going to be easily absorbed by and embraced by the public because they already are thinking about where their food is coming from. So everybody has a role, everybody can do something to think about soil as a way of sequestering carbon in the ground. We can support our organic farmers and buy our locally grown foods. If anybody in this room is interested in divesting from their extractive industry stocks, they could invest in soil in companies like Iroquois Valley Farms. And I think a lot of our investors really like the idea that they own a piece of agriculture. At the Land Trust rally we were at, a number of people said, I always wanted to be a farmer, but I knew I never could. So this is a way of doing it, and when you're investing in the agriculture, you're investing in the soil and climate change. You can talk to your elected officials. I write my elected officials on about a bi-weekly basis to tell them that they really need to support regenerative agriculture. And you can get educated the way it wasn't that hard for me to get educated through the Soil for Climate group and the Soil Age listserv, and now I share all that information with everybody I know on Facebook or on social media, And a lot of people are responding really well to that. That's my sheep and my donkey. And so I want to close by saying, if we have intention, the way I just felt like on January 1st, okay, I'm going to intend to do something to educate myself, to educate my family, educate my friends, and it's going to have an impact. And we can all bring about effective change through that kind of intention. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sally. I have to say it's exciting for me to have a forum on economics, because usually when I do these, it's on the science, you know, how does soil sequester carbon? And so this is a nice change. Now our next speaker is going to combine science and economics. Dee Dee Piercehouse is with the Soil Carbon Coalition, and that's an exciting group that is working with ranchers. I know, I'll help you with that. And farmers all over North America, actually, and it's showing them how to measure carbon in their soil. It's like the most basic thing to be able to do in this sort of new era. And it's just so exciting that she's going out there in the fields and doing it. And then, of course, the ranchers that practice better methods, or farmers, you know, have better crops, and so the economics are there to support it. Dee Dee is also the author of an upcoming book called The Ecology of Care, and I'm looking forward to that. So please welcome Dee Dee Piercehouse. So let's just fire you up here. So this one. This one. Okay. And then when you want to do the video, or is it's already linked into it?
It's linked. There's a link there.
It's a hard link. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So the volume is here.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so Seth gave a nice introduction about the Soil Carbon Coalition's work, and just a little background on that. In 2011, Peter Donovan, who was living in Oregon at the time, who had worked as a sheep herder for a long time, and had also done a lot of work on local economies and things like that, and had learned holistic land management. He decided to sell his belongings and move into a school bus and start traveling around the continent, measuring soil carbon and water infiltration and biological diversity, and how much ground was bare versus how much ground was covered at innovative farms and ranches all around North America. And one of the reasons he did that was because somebody at a conference said, well, you can't build carbon in soils, and even if you could, how would you measure it? So he took that as a challenge. And so he's been doing that since 2011, and in 2014 I met him at a NOFA conference and asked him to teach me how to do monitoring, because he said, you know, I've got 270 plots that I've put in, and I haven't, you know, and there's only one of me, and we're going to need to start remonitoring those because the 3 years had already passed, and there's so many people. He's getting so many calls for people who wanted to monitor. At the time I was working mostly as an acupuncturist, and I was a little worried about what my patients would think, but I told them, well, I'm still sticking long, thin metal objects into complex living systems, so don't worry about it, you know. We're working on the health, don't worry. So I've been traveling with him for the past year on and off, and over the year also, as I learned more about soil carbon and its influence on health on so many levels, I decided that the best thing that I could do to make use of my skills and also keep learning myself was to start creating, oh, that slide's a little funky, but start creating learning resources for students, for schools, for farmers and ranchers, for the general public, so that people understood what this soil restoration work was about. And I've gotten 3 wonderful seed grants from the New Hampshire Entrepreneurs Foundation, from the Wellborn Ecology Fund, and from the Vermont Community Foundation to get the project started, which allowed me to meet with scientists and teachers and ranchers and farmers and students over the summer across the country, and start putting materials together. And just a few weeks ago, I started doing residencies in schools around here, doing some teacher trainings. We have some people here who did that with me. Doing some teacher trainings, and I have schools now and teachers and communities all around North America that want me to come and train them. So it's pretty exciting. It's growing very quickly, a little faster than I can even keep up with. My goal is to raise $100,000 so that over this next year we can really build up those materials and have a package to hand people, and travel around and really get groups of people who know how to monitor their land, know how to understand what they're looking at. So this is something that Peter Donovan drew. He's also a good artist. And you know, we have all these different problems that we're thinking about these days, and every problem has its own department, and every problem has its own funding stream, and everybody's worried about all of them, and it's completely overwhelming. But once you start learning about soil and water, you realize that they're all interconnected, and that the solutions are actually quite simple. But the question is, who's going to do the work of solving all these problems? So first of all, plants are like straws that sip carbon out of the air and turn it into life. What does that mean?
It's magic.
It's magic. We learned this in school, but we've all forgotten. So a friend of mine said, I want to build a machine that will take carbon out of the atmosphere and break it down into carbon, and we'll stick it in the ground, and it'll take the oxygen, take the CO2 and break it into carbon and oxygen, and we can breathe oxygen. And I said, that'll take so much fossil fuels to run that machine. And he said, no, it'll be solar powered. And then about a month later, I read Judy Schwartz's book, Cows Save the Planet. And I was like, wait a minute. Somebody already invented that machine. That's photosynthesis. But meanwhile, we're spending billions of dollars to try to invent machines that do just that. And figuring out how to store carbon in the ground where it won't do any harm. But what's carbon? Carbon is life. 50% of the dry matter of every living thing is carbon. So where's the carbon in this picture?
Where's it not?
Animals, plants, soil.
Animals, the plants, the soil. Where is it? What is the carbon in the soil? Is it the minerals in the soil?
Humus.
In the humus. And what is so a lot of people think of carbon as like a mineral. It sounds very chemical, right? But carbon is the life in the soil. It's the living, the dead, and the very dead. That's another way of thinking of it. It's the microorganisms, it's the worms, it's the little mice that make holes, it's the snakes, it's the goopy stuff that all those things leave behind. What happens when you don't have a lot of carbon in your soil? So this side, this is in South Africa. This side, which side has more carbon in it? You see, I'm in teacher mode now. I've been at schools for 3 weeks. That side, yeah. And if it rained, which side do you think would hold the rain? The left side.
Not only rains on the left.
Yeah, it only rains. That's how it got that way, right? Yeah. And if you were barefoot, which side would be hotter to stand on? The right side. Yeah. So when you get carbon, when you get life going on in the soil, it cools the surrounding atmosphere. It replenishes the small water cycles that actually create the weather that brings rain there. So actually, people say, which side does it rain more on? But in fact, if you extend this out, it would rain more on this side. So it's not a joke. And here you have life that's died off, okay? The life in the soil has died off here, and the CO2 that from those living organisms has gone up into the atmosphere. And here, these plants like straws are drawing it down and putting more life into the soil. So let's talk about soil microorganisms, because we haven't really talked about that much. The big important thing about soil microorganisms is that they create soil aggregates. And soil aggregates means that you take the sand, silt, and clay particles that are in the soil, that are the mineral portion of the soil, and they stick them together. What happens when you stick little things together is that then you end up with pore space in between. And what happens when you have pore space and it rains? Well, you get the water can soak down in. The water gets filtered down through the soil, so it cleans it naturally when it gets to the water table or to the rivers. And it also creates structural integrity, so it can't blow away. And if it's not going to shift too much, so you can build a house on it, you can build a road on it. Sorry, Walter, I stole your line. Healthy topsoil is a carbon-rich sponge that soaks up water. So let's see, can we get this? Seth, I think I might need, oh, maybe it's going to work.
Go to YouTube, that's all right, it should work.
Okay, here we go. Oh.
So, this is a quick little demonstration just to compare aggregated soil versus unaggregated soil. So our flour here represents our poorly aggregated soil. It doesn't have a lot of pore spaces. And our bread has all these nice little pore spaces in it. So our water infiltrates really, really well. So this is styrofoam cup. Poked a few holes in it to simulate rain. First I'm going to do over the flour, just so you can see, just kind of runs right off, doesn't really go through, runs off, carries all these particles with it, like poorly aggregated soil would do if it were to rain naturally. All this stuff would end up in our streams and our lakes, and that's not healthy. But over our bread, you can see that most of it is absorbed almost instantly all the way through. And see, even if it were to rain really heavily or if there were to be a flood, it still enters relatively well. Versus, well, you come back over here to the flour, it's just running off and taking everything with it. So, that's a quick analogy to see how different soil types would work. So, pore spaces, again, infiltration, all the way through,